Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I spend quite a bit of my time doing research and some of the rest of it doing teaching. But one of my other jobs is, we have various administrative jobs that we do around here, and one of the jobs that I do is I'm the undergraduate admissions tutor. And so this time of year, I get asked quite a lot of questions about applying to university, applying for physics at university, and the specifics of the kind of the UK process, which is a thing called UCAS, which is this centralised system that people apply through. And people just want to know, what are we looking for on the admissions side? What should they be writing in their applications? So I thought it might be interesting to make a video just to kind of give some general advice as to what you should be putting down on these application forms. So I actually got in touch with this organisation UCAS, which processes these things, all the UK applications for university, and got their permission to actually show you what I receive from them. Because it's always good when you're going through this process, you're applying to university, essentially you're trying to convince a university to give you a place, right? So it's good to kind of put yourself in the position of the person who's making that decision and say, well, what is he or she looking for? What information do they have? So I've got UCAS's permission to show you the form that they send to me after you've applied, and so I can show you what it is that I look at and what how I come about making the decisions about whether or not to offer people places at university. So here it is. So this is the form I get, and it unfolds into a rather bigger sheet of paper. So there it is. Yeah. This one, as I say, this is a kind of it's just got some test data that UCAS put in. In fact, one of the sections of the form here has blah, 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 blah written in it, which is not what you should write on these forms. But this is just to show you the kind of the range of information that I have about applications, about applicants and deciding whether or not to make them an offer. So there's sort of 4 bits to the form that we get to look at. There's the first section, which I look at first because it's the front page. It's just got information about the name of the applicant, what school they're at, those kinds of things. So I can just see from where in the country they're applying. There's nothing really there that I use to make decisions. It also tells me which of the various courses that we offer they've actually applied for. We don't get to see where else they've applied to, so I can't nose into that kind of information, but I get to see that they've applied here. So that's the first thing that we look at. Then the next thing I have is a section on qualifications, and there's 2 bits to this. There's the qualifications the students have already done, so I can see how well they've been doing in school. And then there's a bit about the qualifications they haven't yet taken. So these are the ones that they will have completed before they go to university. And obviously there I'm interested to know whether they're doing the right qualifications to prepare them for the course here. And in particular, it involves doing physics and maths to the highest level that they possibly can. So that again, that's kind of, if you're not doing physics and maths at that level, at that point, the application will get rejected. Then there's 2 bits on the bottom here, which are to do with, so let's deal with this one first. This is your school or college writes a reference about you. And there's 2 bits to this. There's a bit that says predicted grades. So that's basically how well they think you're going to do in your A-levels, your high school qualifications. And then they write a reference about you as well. So they write, what kind of student you are, how hard you work, all those kinds of things. So obviously that's sort of important information to us. And then there's the last bit, which is the bit that the students actually have control over. And this is the thing I actually get asked most questions about as an applicant, which is that you get to write a personal statement. So you actually get to write a bit about yourself, why you're applying to do the course that you're doing, and just a bit of background to try and convince me that you're going to be the most wonderful physics student ever. So this is the bit where, as I say, you actually have control over it if you're applying to universities, and it's the bit where you get to kind of convince people. It's really the only sort of freedom you have to really convince the admissions tutor that they really should be offering you a place. So the kind of things that students ought to be putting in there are obviously a bit about why they're applying for the particular degree they're applying for. So obviously some information about, why if it's a physics application, why physics is the most important thing to them, why they really want to study it at university, a bit about some physics that they've done, maybe a project at school or a particular piece of the curriculum at school that they found particularly interesting. Anything extracurricular to do with science, or if they've gone on a visit to, I don't know, Jodrell Bank or CERN or somewhere, or if they watch 60 Symbols videos, those are good things to put in there to show that you've just got that kind of broader interest in. But then also you want to kind of, so the way the system works is at the end of the year, when I'm trying to decide who the last few places should go to, they tend to go to students who kind of stand out. They're just students who are doing something a bit exceptional. So obviously, primarily we're looking at whether you're getting the right kinds of grades, but when we're looking for that last kind of tiebreaker, it's if you do something just that little bit unusual, if you play underwater ice hockey or, just do something a little different, it'll have stuck in my mind, and you just come across as the kind of student who has the spark to do something a bit different, to drive themselves forward, to do something original. And that's really what we're looking for in physics. But I suspect what I've been saying actually mostly applies to almost any subject you might be applying to do at university. They're looking for students who have that bit of a spark. So if you can put across in that personal statement that you're just that little bit exceptional, that's really what you want to be saying there. You don't want to fib, okay? You don't ever say, you should never say something in the personal statement that isn't true. because sooner or later you're probably going to get interviewed, you might meet with an academic sometime, they'll have read the form and they'll say, oh, I see you said you read A Brief History of Time, what did you think of it? And if it turns out that you've never actually read A Brief History of Time, at that point you're likely to be deeply embarrassed, and that's really not a good thing to do. So don't put anything in there that fundamentally isn't true. We actually chat with students before they come here. So actually, and some places they do formal interview processes before they decide whether or not to make you an offer. And so the information they'll use for that interview chat will be largely what you say about yourself in this personal statement. So it depends on the institution, but in some institutions they haven't yet made the decision by the time they're having that conversation. So you don't want to get called out that way. Here we have enough applicants to actually fill the places many times over. So actually just using the marks isn't enough. So we are using this extra information as well. So you really do want to make the best possible case for yourself in there.
It's not fair that whether you play hockey or not counts towards...
It doesn't, but it doesn't have to be that. I just want to know that you do something with your life. If you're really the kind of student who's got through school just by doing what they were told and never really doing anything very innovative and imaginative of their own, then probably you're not going to do that well at university, because at university you really are expected to take more control of your own life and actually kind of, push yourself forward.
You mentioned that the school writes a reference.
Yeah.
How much weight do you put on that? Because I'd be really scared about, is my school going to be lazy? Are they going to give me a good reference?
Some, actually the problem tends to be the other way. Schools tend to, want to do the best they possibly can for their students, and so they just get carried away with their superlatives. So because of that, and because it varies from school to school, we don't put a huge amount of weight on it. For example, they predict your grades, but our experience shows that, if they predict you're going to get a B, that could well mean you're going to get an A. So there's, we allow for that level of uncertainty, and we make sure that anyone who's kind of at least within a shouting distance of getting the right kind of grades according to the predictions that they're getting will be treated fairly. So we're aware of the fact that there are these issues with the statements that schools come up with, and we just deal with them appropriately.
What about the schools or the places they're from? Does that have any...
It does. So one of the things we look at is the kind of school that somebody went to, and this is a very contentious area because you've got to be very careful about this, because you don't want to discriminate against someone because they had the good fortune to go to a good school. But equally, somebody who can get, say, a B grade at a school where typically people leave the school with no qualifications at all, has clearly kind of gone right against the system and gone that extra mile and really must have put the effort in. And again, we want to kind of recognise that achievement. So we do look at the kind of school and what their typical achievements actually are for the kind of school that they are, and we use that as part of the process that we go through.
The part the student writes, how important is grammar, spelling?
Very. So that's probably the single most embarrassing thing you can do, is spelling things wrong, getting the grammar wrong. Second only to putting things which are factually untrue in there. So the advice is proofread it yourself and get other people to proofread it as well, because it's one of those things that when you write a document yourself, after a while you don't notice the errors, you really don't. And it's only when you get somebody else to read it over that they'll tell you that actually you put the wrong kind of there in, or that you've just made some silly mistake that you just don't notice when you're reading it yourself.
You must be able to tell us a funny story of things you've seen in there or things you've read. Or...
Actually, they used to be much more fun because they used to be handwritten. And so my favourite UCAS personal statement of all time, somebody wrote their personal statement in the form of a spiral, starting in the middle of the page and working their way outwards. The scariest one I ever saw was somebody who wrote that they've been doing some work experience in an air traffic control tower. I don't really like the idea of work experience students working in air traffic control, but there we go. But those are the kinds of things that stick in the mind, and actually those are the people who probably get the places, because again, when I'm coming down to it and thinking who should we give that last couple of places to, it's really the applicant who's just done something that sticks in my mind that stands out.
Do you wish they were still handwritten?
No, because actually my eyesight's not up to it these days, and so actually it's much easier now they're all typewritten. And it also just takes out, again, something that's not terribly relevant, in that I don't really want to be giving people places because they've got neater handwriting. So it just levels the playing field for everyone to have to actually type them up this way.
Do you go through them all yourself, and does anyone else do it?
Lots of people look at them. So here at the University of Nottingham, they're centrally processed. If they're really clear cut, then they get offers made at that point. The more marginal ones get passed on to people like me, so we look at them in much more detail. So there's a slew of people who look at them. And then, of course, when you actually come here on a visit day, the person you've been meeting in an interview would also have read through the form as well, so they can chat to you about it. So typically, one of these forms will be read by half a dozen people at some point or another.
Are you aware of the power you're wielding, the significance of what you're doing?
You've got to do this very professionally, right? Because you're actually making decisions about people's lives. And so you really have got to be very careful. And the rules are very strict, right? That actually we are required by this process to treat all applicants equally, which means that an application which comes in October and one that comes in January, if they're equivalent applications, I have to treat them in the same way. And if I made an offer to one, I have to make an offer to the other. If I didn't make an offer to one, I have to not make an offer to the other. So there's a lot of care that goes into this process to make sure that we do actually treat all the applicants equally.